He's not good enough to be a pro quarterback. Maybe he should switch to running back. Just a product of a stacked roster. System quarterback. These are the words that have followed Jalen Hurts at every stage of his career. In a league that celebrates elite talent, Hurts has led his team to 2 Super Bowls in 4 years as a starter, been named an MVP finalist, earned All-Pro honors, and broken records with his dual-threat abilities. Yet somehow he remains on the outside looking in when the conversation turns to the NFL's elite quarterbacks. His signature play, the nearly unstoppable tush-push, became so dominant that the NFL considered banning it entirely. Think about that. A player performs so exceptionally at something that the league contemplates changing the rules. And instead of celebrating his unique abilities, critics use it as another excuse to diminish him. The pattern is unmistakable. When Jalen Hurts succeeds, others get the credit. His coaches, his offensive line, his receivers. When he struggles, the narrative becomes, "See, we told you he wasn't that good." No matter what mountain he climbs, there's always a higher one placed in front of him. Today, we're diving into the NFL's complicated relationship with Jalen Hurts, a story of constant doubt, remarkable resilience, and the question that hangs over it all. What does a quarterback who's done everything have to do to finally get the respect he deserves? Jalen Hurts was born on August 7th, 1998 in Houston, Texas. He grew up in the nearby town of Channelview, a working-class area where football wasn't just a game, it was a way of life. His father, Jalen Hurts Sr., was the head football coach at Channelview High School. From an early age, Jalen was surrounded by the game, learning the fundamentals on the same field where his dad coached, and his older brother, Jalen Jr., played quarterback before eventually becoming a coach himself. The Hurts family was built on discipline and hard work. Growing up with a coach for a father meant there were no shortcuts, no excuses. Every day was an opportunity to improve, to push limits. This mentality shaped Jalen from his earliest days. But Jalen wasn't just an ordinary athlete. Even among the football-obsessed culture of Texas high school sports, he stood out. By the time he was a sophomore in high school, Hurts was squatting over 500 pounds. His strength and work ethic were legendary even as a teenager. Teammates would marvel at his dedication in the weight room, often finding him there hours before and after practice. On the field, he was just as dominant. In his senior year at Channelview High, Hurts threw for nearly 2,400 yards and 26 touchdowns, while adding another 400 yards and 25 scores on the ground. He was a dual-threat quarterback before it was fashionable, capable of beating defenses with both his arm and legs. Despite those impressive numbers, many major college programs doubted him. Some thought he was more of an athlete than a quarterback, a narrative that would follow him throughout his career. Schools like Texas A&M pushed hard to land him, but it was Alabama, and specifically offensive coordinator Lane Kiffin, that saw his potential as a true quarterback. Kiffin promised Hurts he would get a legitimate shot at playing quarterback, not just being converted to another position. And so, Jalen Hurts took his talents to Tuscaloosa, ready to prove the doubters wrong. When Jalen Hurts arrived at Alabama in 2016, he wasn't expected to start right away. Nick Saban had already named Blake Barnett the starter heading into the season, but it didn't take long for Hurts to make his move. By the second half of the opening game against USC, Hurts took over the offense, and he never looked back. As a true freshman, Hurts broke records. He threw for nearly 2,800 yards, 23 touchdowns, and added another 954 yards on the ground with 13 rushing scores. His rushing total set an Alabama quarterback record. His ability to make plays with both his arm and legs gave Alabama's offense a new dimension. He set the Crimson Tide's single-season total touchdown record with 36 and was named both SEC Freshman of the Year and SEC Offensive Player of the Year. Hurts led the Crimson Tide to a perfect 12-0 regular season and the top seed in the college football playoff. After a solid showing in the semifinal against Washington, Hurts struggled in the national championship game against Clemson. He completed just 42% of his passes for 131 yards. Despite scoring a go-ahead touchdown late in the game with his legs, Alabama's defense gave up a last-second score, and Clemson walked away with the title. The next year, Hurts returned as the starter, but his numbers dipped slightly. Alabama lost to Auburn in the Iron Bowl, though they still made the college football playoff. In the national championship against Georgia, Hurts was benched at halftime after a dreadful first half where he completed less than 50% of his passes for only 21 yards. As Alabama fell behind 13-0, Tua Tagovailoa came in, rallied the tide, and won the game with an iconic overtime touchdown. It was a crushing moment that would have broken many quarterbacks. Being benched on college football's biggest stage in front of millions of viewers would send many players into the transfer portal immediately, but not Jalen Hurts. Despite the humiliation, Hurts stayed at Alabama. In 2018, he backed up Tua, improved his game, and got his redemption in the SEC championship game, leading Alabama to a comeback win when Tua went down with an injury. It was a perfect display of the character and resilience that would define his career. After graduating with his degree, Hurts knew he had to transfer to get another chance to lead. He chose Oklahoma, a program that had just produced back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners in Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray under head coach Lincoln Riley. From the moment Hurts stepped on the field for the Sooners, he was electric. In his lone season at Oklahoma, he threw for over 3,800 yards and 32 touchdowns, while adding nearly 1,300 rushing yards and 20 rushing scores. His total yardage surpassed 5,000, and he showcased the improvements he'd made as a passer. Under Riley's system, Hurts looked confident, accurate, and dangerous. He led Oklahoma to a 12-1 record, a Big 12 championship, and a spot in the college football playoff. Hurts was a finalist for the Heisman Trophy, finishing second behind Joe Burrow, whose LSU team was in the midst of one of the greatest seasons in college football history. In the CFP semifinal against Burrow's LSU squad, Oklahoma was overmatched. Despite the blowout loss, Hurts had cemented his legacy as one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in college football history. More importantly, he'd silenced many critics who thought he couldn't develop as a passer. Hurts completed his master's degree while at Oklahoma and declared for the NFL draft. His college career had been a roller coaster, benchings, transfers, redemption, but he had proved one thing without a doubt. Jalen Hurts was a leader and a winner. Heading into the 2020 NFL Draft, Jalen Hurts remained one of the most polarizing quarterback prospects. Despite his breakout season at Oklahoma and clear improvement as a passer, many NFL scouts still weren't convinced. They labeled him a gadget player, a potential backup, or someone who might switch positions entirely. Teams questioned his ability to make NFL-level throws and run a pro-style offense. At the Combine, Hurts performed well in nearly every test, showcasing elite results in the speed and explosion metrics. But his size, standing 6'1" and weighing 222 pounds, was considered poor for a quarterback by traditional standards. Once again, the old narratives followed him. Great athlete, questionable quarterback. As draft night unfolded, 4 quarterbacks went in the first round: Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, and Jordan Love. Hurts waited and waited. It wasn't until the middle of the second round that his name was finally called. The Philadelphia Eagles selected Jalen Hurts with the 53rd overall pick. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Eagles fans were shocked. Analysts ripped the pick apart. Carson Wentz was still the starter, and Philly had far greater needs. Why would they draft a quarterback? Some speculated Hurts was drafted to be a gadget player like Taysom Hill. Others questioned whether he'd even be given a chance to play quarterback at all. ESPN analyst Mel Kiper Jr. called it the most surprising pick in the draft, adding that it created a major quarterback controversy. Former Eagles quarterback Donovan McNabb said the pick was disrespectful to Carson Wentz. Even the Eagles' front office seemed divided on the selection. The Eagles justified the pick by talking about quarterback factory philosophies and the importance of the backup position, but it was clear they weren't fully committed to Hurts as their future. General manager Howie Roseman told the media, "When we drafted Jalen, it's certainly not about looking at the quarterback position in the short term. From day one, it was clear. The NFL didn't believe in Jalen Hurts. Even the team that drafted him seemed unsure about his role." Once again, Hurts had to prove everyone wrong. Jalen Hurts began his NFL career buried on the depth chart. He was listed as the Eagles' third-string quarterback behind Carson Wentz and Nate Sudfeld. Early in the 2020 season, Hurts was used sparingly in special packages, mostly as a runner or decoy. There were constant questions about whether he was even viewed as a real quarterback or just an athletic gadget player. But as the 2020 season unraveled for Philadelphia, things changed quickly. Carson Wentz's play deteriorated dramatically, leading the NFL in interceptions and struggling with turnovers. By week 13, head coach Doug Peterson made the decision to bench Wentz and give Hurts his first start against the New Orleans Saints. Hurts brought a spark immediately. He led the Eagles to a surprising 24-21 win over the Saints, snapping their 9-game winning streak. His ability to extend plays and create with his legs gave the Philadelphia offense a dimension it had been missing. Over his 4 starts that season, Hurts threw for 1,061 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. He also rushed for 354 yards and 3 scores. The Eagles finished the season 4-11-1 and missed the playoffs. But Hurts had shown flashes of potential. Despite those flashes, the questions persisted. Was Hurts just a stopgap? Was he good enough to be a long-term starter? After the season ended, the Eagles fired Doug Peterson, and the organization seemed in turmoil. Carson Wentz was traded to Indianapolis, and Nick Sirianni was brought in as head coach. Even with Wentz gone, some believed the Eagles would draft another quarterback with their 6th overall pick, but they didn't, selecting Devonta Smith instead, Hurts' former Alabama teammate. In year 2, as the full-time starter, Hurts and the Eagles began to show promise under Sirianni. Jalen had an incredible opener against the Falcons, throwing for 3 touchdowns and finishing with a passer rating of 126.4. The season was up and down, but Hurts showed significant improvement, throwing for over 300 yards and 16 touchdowns against 9 interceptions. On the ground, he was even more impressive, rushing for 784 yards and 10 touchdowns. The Eagles finished 9-8, earning a wild-card playoff berth, but in the playoffs against Tampa Bay, Hurts struggled, losing a fumble and throwing 2 interceptions as Philadelphia lost 31-15 to Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. The performance gave his critics fresh ammunition. Despite the glimpses of greatness shown in the 2021 season, the verdict was still out on Hurts' viability as a franchise quarterback. Heading into his 3rd year, there were still rumblings that the Eagles might look to upgrade at quarterback. Reports surfaced that they had inquired about Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson. Once again, Hurts would have to prove himself worthy of the starting job. Heading into the 2022 season, Jalen Hurts still had plenty of doubters. Some called him a game manager. Others said he was a running back playing quarterback. But Eagles general manager Howie Roseman believed in him, and he made a bold move to give Hurts the weapons he needed. Philadelphia traded their 1st-round pick to the Tennessee Titans for star wide receiver A.J. Brown, a close friend of Hurts from their college recruiting days. With Brown joining Devonta Smith and tight end Dallas Goedert, the Eagles had built one of the most dangerous receiving corps in the NFL, and Hurts took full advantage. Hurts posted career-high numbers in 2022. He threw for 3,701 yards, 22 touchdowns, and just 6 interceptions. On the ground, he added 760 rushing yards and 13 rushing scores. His dual-threat ability became nearly unstoppable, and his leadership was undeniable. Philadelphia finished the regular season 14-3, securing the number 1 seed in the NFC. But one of the most effective weapons in the Eagles' arsenal was something simple: the quarterback sneak. Nicknamed the tush push, the Eagles lined up Jalen Hurts under center on short yardage plays, then shoved him forward with teammates from behind. With Hurts' powerful legs and low center of gravity, the play was nearly unstoppable. Philadelphia converted these sneaks at an incredible 93% success rate. It became a signature weapon for the Eagles. Anytime they faced a 3rd and 1 or 4th and short, Hurts would line up, and the offense would bulldoze forward for a 1st down. No tricks, no gimmicks, just brute strength and flawless execution. The success didn't go unnoticed. Hurts was named a Pro Bowler, earned 2nd-team All-Pro honors, and finished as the runner-up in MVP, voting behind Patrick Mahomes. In the playoffs, he continued to shine. leading dominant wins over the New York Giants, 38-7, and the San Francisco 49ers, 31-7, to reach Super Bowl leave-in. On the biggest stage of his career, Hurts delivered one of the greatest Super Bowl performances by a quarterback in NFL history. He accounted for 4 total touchdowns, throwing for 304 yards and a touchdown, while rushing for 70 yards and 3 more scores. He even converted a clutch 2-point conversion late in the game to tie it at 35. Hurts became the first quarterback in Super Bowl history to rush for 3 touchdowns. He began the scoring with a touchdown on the patented tush push, added a beautiful 45-yard touchdown pass to A.J. Brown, and countered a Chiefs fumble recovery touchdown with another rushing score of his own to give Philadelphia a 21-14 lead. In the fourth quarter, with the Eagles trailing by 8 points, Hurts engineered a masterful 8-play, 75-yard drive, which he capped off with his 3rd rushing touchdown of the contest and a game-tying 2-point conversion. But despite his heroics, the Eagles lost 38-35 to Mahomes and the Chiefs when Harrison Butker kicked a field goal with just 8 seconds remaining. And while Mahomes was celebrated for his gutsy performance on an injured ankle, Hurts' historic showing was largely overshadowed. Once again, it felt like Hurts wasn't getting the credit he deserved. Fox's Colin Cowherd summed up the inequity. If Jalen Hurts had Mahomes' stat line and Mahomes had Hurts' stat line, everyone would be crowning Mahomes as the greatest ever. But because it's Hurts, everyone's talking about the weapons around him. Success breeds resentment. As the Eagles dominated during the 2022 season, complaints started to roll in about their signature play. Some teams argued the tush push was unfair. Others claimed it was a safety issue, even though no serious injuries were linked to it. By the offseason, the NFL's competition committee was discussing whether to ban the play entirely. For many, it felt personal. The tush push wasn't just a play. It was a symbol of what made Hurts special. His strength, his toughness, his ability to lead a physical, relentless offense. And now, the league was considering taking it away. Critics said the Eagles' offense was cheap for using it so often. Some said Hurts was only effective because of it. But nobody talked about how it was Hurts' unique skill set, his power, decision-making, and toughness that made it work. While other teams tried to replicate the play with minimal success, Philadelphia's version worked because of Hurts. Once again, it felt like the NFL was targeting Jalen Hurts for doing something better than anyone else. Coming off a Super Bowl appearance, expectations for Jalen Hurts and the Eagles were sky high heading into 2023. And for the first half of the season, they lived up to the hype. Philadelphia jumped out to a dominant 10-1 start, and Hurts was once again in MVP conversations. He was efficient, he was leading comebacks, and the Eagles looked like the team to beat in the NFC. But then it all fell apart. The Eagles lost 5 of their final 6 regular season games. Whispers turned into headlines, locker room drama, leadership questions, and criticisms of first-year coordinators Brian Johnson and Sean Desai. The offense became stagnant. The defense, once dominant, couldn't stop anyone. And suddenly, the team that looked unbeatable in November was limping into the playoffs in January. Through it all, Jalen Hurts took the blame. Despite posting career highs in passing yards, over 3,800, and touchdowns, 23, his 15 interceptions became the story. Analysts called him reckless. They said the Eagles had been figured out. Some pundits even suggested that 2022 was a fluke season for Hurts. The media didn't hold back after Philadelphia's humiliating 32-9 blowout loss to Tampa Bay in the wildcard round. While the team as a whole collapsed, much of the focus was on Hurts. Even though he had a quarterback rating over 100 in that game, it didn't matter. Narratives had already been written. Former NFL quarterback Chris Sims dropped Hurts out of his top 10 quarterback rankings. In his 2024 rankings, Sims had Hurts behind Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Burrow, Herbert, Stafford, Stroud, and Prescott. Fox Sports put out an article before the 2024 season that ranked Hurts 10th, behind not only the elite QBs but also Aaron Rodgers and Brock Purdy. NFL.com writer Nick Shook also had Hurts ranked 10th prior to the 2024 campaign. PFF placed him 9th in a May 2024 article. But when you dig into the numbers and the accomplishments, these rankings tell a different story. Patrick Mahomes is in his own league. He's the gold standard, multiple MVPs, 3 Super Bowl rings, and consistent elite production. No one is arguing Hurts belongs above him. But after Mahomes, it gets interesting. Lamar Jackson has an MVP and electrifying stats, especially as a rusher. But Hurts has 2 Super Bowl appearances to Lamar's 0. Hurts also boasts a higher approximate value, AV, over the last few seasons, and his team's success in the playoffs puts him ahead in that category. Joe Burrow has superior passing numbers, more yards, more touchdowns, but Hurts crushes him as a runner and has been to more Super Bowls, 2 to Burrow's 1. Even by AV, Hurts leads Burrow 71-56. Despite Burrow's reputation as a franchise savior, the argument for Hurts being the more impactful player is legitimate. Josh Allen, statistically, it's close. Allen has more passing yards and touchdowns, but Hurts is more efficient as a runner and has made it to more Super Bowls. Both are dual threat quarterbacks, but Hurts edges Allen in approximate value and has proven himself on the biggest stage more than once. And yet, in the media rankings, Hurts consistently falls behind them. The numbers say Hurts is right there with the best. The media says otherwise. And once again, it begs the question, why? What separates the good quarterbacks from the great ones is their ability to perform when the stakes are highest. And despite what his critics might say, Jalen Hurts has proven himself time and again in the biggest moments. In the 2022 playoffs, Hurts was surgical. In the divisional round against the Giants, he completed 67% of his passes for 154 yards and 2 touchdowns, while adding another score on the ground in a dominant 38-7 win. The next week against the 49ers in the NFC Championship, Hurts didn't need to do much as the Eagles' defense crushed San Francisco, but he still managed the game perfectly in the 31-7 victory. Then came the Super Bowl against Kansas City. On football's grandest stage, Hurts played the game of his life. His 304 passing yards combined with 70 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns put him in rare company. He accounted for all 4 Eagles touchdowns and the game-tying 2-point conversion. His only mistake, a fumble that was returned for a Chiefs touchdown, was balanced by his otherwise flawless performance. With the game on the line in the fourth quarter, he engineered a clutch 75-yard touchdown drive to tie the game. After the 2023 season's disappointing finish, many wrote Hurts off. The narrative shifted from future MVP to product of the system, but Hurts responded in typical fashion by putting his head down and working. The 2024 season saw a more efficient, more controlled Hurts. While his raw passing numbers dipped to around 2,900 yards, he posted career best marks in both completion percentage and passer rating, with an impressive 3.1 touchdown to interception ratio. With Saquon Barkley now in the backfield to take pressure off, Hurts didn't have to do everything himself. When needed, though, he still made the critical plays, especially in the playoffs. In the wild card round against Green Bay, Hurts led the Eagles to a 22-10 victory with a poised, error-free performance. Against the Rams in the divisional round, it was Barkley who stole the show. But Hurts made several clutch throws on third down to keep drives alive. Then, in the NFC Championship against division rival Washington, the Eagles' offense exploded for 55 points in a blowout victory, sending Philly to their second Super Bowl. In 3 years with Hurts under center, it was an emphatic statement. In just 4 seasons as a starter, Hurts had led the Eagles to multiple conference championships and Super Bowl appearances. No other quarterback from his draft class, not even first overall pick Joe Burrow, could match that level of team success. What makes Hurts' playoff performances even more impressive is how he's responded to adversity. After the disappointment of the 2023 wildcard loss to Tampa Bay, many quarterbacks would have been rattled. But Hurts displayed the same resilience he showed when benched at Alabama. He came back stronger, more focused, and more determined than ever. In a league that loves a redemption story, you'd think Hurts would be celebrated. But instead, he's questioned at every turn. His successes are attributed to his supporting cast, while his struggles are magnified as evidence of his limitations. It's a double standard that few other quarterbacks face, especially those considered among the elite. After a brutal collapse in 2023, big changes were coming to Philadelphia. General manager Howie Roseman wasn't wasting time. In free agency, he made a huge move, signing star running back Saquon Barkley. The goal was clear: take pressure off Jalen Hurts and restore balance to the offense. At the same time, Nick Sirianni overhauled his staff, bringing in Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator and Vic Fangio to lead the defense. The result? A completely different Eagles team, more balanced, more disciplined, more consistent. Hurts didn't put up his gaudiest numbers in 2024, but he was efficient. His best season in terms of completion percentage and passer rating. He threw for just under 3,000 yards, had a 3-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and returned to being a lethal weapon in the run game when it mattered. With Barkley pounding defenses for over 2,000 rushing yards and the defense dominating under Fangio, Hurts didn't have to carry the load alone, but when he was needed, he delivered. Where does this leave Hurts in the hierarchy of NFL quarterbacks? In only 4 seasons as a starter, Hurts is a second-team All-Pro and a 2-time Pro Bowler. He's the best running quarterback in the game outside of Lamar Jackson and has developed into a solid passer. He's led his team to 2 NFC championships and Super Bowls. By the numbers and accomplishments, Hurts has established himself as a top 5 quarterback in the league. Yet the national perception lags far behind the reality. It's hard to pin down why exactly he doesn't generate similar buzz to Allen, Burrow, and Jackson. Is it because he wasn't a first-round pick? Is it because he doesn't have the prototypical quarterback size? Is it because his play style isn't as flashy as some of his peers? Or is it something deeper? Jalen, by the numbers, has been excellent since he took over as a full-time starter in 2021. According to AV, approximate value, which measures a player's overall contribution, Hurts ranks near the top among all quarterbacks over the past few seasons. His total value to his team, combining passing and rushing, puts him in elite company. Critics will point to the talent around him, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, and now Saquon Barkley, as the reason for his success. But is that really fair? Every great quarterback has had weapons. Mahomes has had Kelsey and Hill. Allen has had Diggs. Burrow has Chase and Higgins. Should Hurts be penalized for having a good supporting cast? The super talented teams Hurts has played on have been assembled in part because the front office believed in him. The Eagles could have spent draft capital on a quarterback, but instead they invested in weapons to complement Hurts. They believed in him as their franchise quarterback, even when many outside the organization didn't. What's especially remarkable about Hurts' journey is how he's had to continually prove himself at every level. He wasn't supposed to start as a freshman at Alabama. He wasn't supposed to reinvent himself as a passer at Oklahoma. He wasn't supposed to be an NFL starting quarterback. Yet, at every turn, he's exceeded expectations. With another Super Bowl appearance on his resume, the question of Hurts' legacy is becoming more pressing. What will this year's Super Bowl performance and result do for how he's thought of? With a win, it will do a whole hell of a lot. It would give him something that neither Burrow, Allen, nor Jackson has, a Super Bowl ring, and would silence many of his critics. But even without a championship, Hurts has already cemented himself as one of the most successful young quarterbacks in the NFL. The only remaining question is when the rest of the league will finally give him the respect he deserves. No matter how you look at it, Jalen Hurts has already done more than most quarterbacks ever will. He's led his team to 2 Super Bowl appearances. He's been an MVP finalist. He's set records, defied expectations, and proven over and over again that he belongs at the top of the NFL. And yet, the doubt remains. Some say it's because of the talent around him. Others say he's a product of the system. But if winning, leading, and producing at the highest level aren't enough, what more does Hurts have to do? Perhaps the NFL's treatment of Hurts reveals more about the league than it does about him. In a sport that prides itself on meritocracy, there seems to be a different standard for Hurts. The goalposts keep moving. First, he wasn't accurate enough, then he couldn't read defenses well enough. Then he relied too much on his legs. Then he had too many turnovers. Now it's that he has too much talent around him. At some point, you have to wonder if the criticism is about football at all. Jalen Hurts doesn't fit the traditional quarterback mold. He was a second-round pick, not a first. He wasn't anointed the guy from day one. And he's not the flashy, loud superstar some teams love to build their brands around. Instead, he's quiet, methodical, and all business. And that might be exactly why the NFL seems to hate him. Hurts came into the league with a chip on his shoulder. Teams doubted him. Analysts doubted him. Even the team that drafted him, the Philadelphia Eagles, didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. He was labeled a gadget player, a temporary solution, a placeholder until someone better came along. But Jalen Hurts didn't follow the script. He outworked everyone. He developed as a passer. He led his team to multiple NFC Championship games and Super Bowls. And he did it without ever demanding attention or drama. Maybe it's because he wasn't supposed to be here. Maybe it's because he made them all look wrong. Maybe it's because he's not loud enough. Maybe it's because he's not flashy. Or maybe it's because he's made a lot of people eat their words, and they're still trying to find a way to be right about him. Whatever the reason, the results speak for themselves. The numbers say he's elite. The wins say he's elite. The film says he's elite. But still, the NFL doesn't treat him like he is. Jalen Hurts has already proven who he is. The question now is, when will everyone else catch up? Let us know in the comments if you think Jalen Hurts is overrated, underrated, or properly rated among today's NFL quarterbacks. If you enjoyed this breakdown of Jalen Hurts' career and the NFL's treatment of him, make sure to like and subscribe to NFL Star Stories for more in-depth player documentaries.